Well, good morning, everyone. Really appreciated the very engaging session that we had yesterday. This morning, Dr. Belshaw will start off and give us a little update on some of the things that have been happening in DERT, specifically around the past performance on our strategic plan. Then I'll go to the virtual podium and talk about the new strategic plan and give you an update on some of the other things that have happened at NAEHS. So we've got other things on the agenda, but without further ado, why don't I turn it back over to David and let's get the show on the road.
Sounds good. Let me share my screen and make sure I am sharing the correct screen. You got that full screen, Nathan?
Yes, we do. All good.
Excellent. All right. So welcome, everybody. It's my pleasure to give the DERT update to Council this morning. So we've got a fairly light set of topics, but we're actually spend quite a while on the strategic plan accomplishments with just some very quick updates on staffing and some of the activities that DERT has been working on since our June council meeting. So staffing updates. I'm very pleased to announce that for the first time since I've been in the division director role, we've had no staff departures since our June council meeting. So we've only had a couple additions to our staff. The first is to introduce you to Dr. Sadika Satala, who has joined the Exposure Response and Technology branch as a program officer. She will be taking over our cardiopulmonary and inflammation resolution portfolio that was previously managed by Sri Nadador before he became the branch chief. She's earned her PhD looking at working on atherosclerosis from the Scripps Research Institute in Florida. And following her research activities, she moved into the pharmaceutical sector, working for AstraZeneca and more recently biotech startup called Asteroid Therapeutics, where she worked on identification of small molecules to suppress cholesterol biosynthesis. Our other new staff member is Ms. Tracy McGraw, who's joined the grants management branch as a grants management specialist. She brings a wealth of experience. She started as a grants management specialist at NIH in 2011 and has worked at NCI, NIDDK, and NIA as a grants management specialist. So she comes in fully certified and ready to take over some of our larger, more complex programs from day one. So welcome, Tracy and Sadika. In terms of the DERT activities, it's been a fairly light summer for us. We've been focusing on our end of year awards, but we have had just a few things to highlight. So we held a grantee meeting for our partnership with the Fogarty Institute on our GIA Health Hubs. We also, I think Rick will talk a little bit about this in his presentation. We hosted a meeting of the NIH Tribal Advisory Council at NIEHS in June. I think we had a little bit of discussion yesterday on RNA biology and the National Academy's report in Dr. Green's presentation. So we were actively engaged with that. And then just earlier this month, we had a meeting to kind of do a beta test of our autism web-based tool to link the autism research with the autism spectrum disorder community, and also held a meeting of our worker training programs, disaster supplement awardees in Wilmington, North Carolina, just last week. Coming up for the rest of the year, we have a number of meetings coming that I think a few of you are probably going to be participating in. We have our Children's Translational Centers meeting in September on the 16th, 17th, and also our Core Centers meeting that's being hosted by Johns Hopkins the 23rd to 25th. And then through the rest of the fall, we'll have another our worker training program fall grantee meeting, an SRP meeting on our technology fair, and continuing our SRP e-learning webinar series throughout the fall. So quite a few things coming up in the rest of the year. But I want to spend the bulk of my time kind of walking through our current strategic plan, our 2018 to 2023 strategic plan, and presenting a few highlights of selected accomplishments on work that we did throughout the strategic plan. As I suspect you all know, DERT uses the strategic plan as the primary driver of the work that we do. And every grant that we have funded through the last 6 years has been mapped to the strategic plan and tracks to at least one element of the strategic plan. But it's not just about the funding. The strategic plan guides all of our work and our collaborations within the federal government and with external partners. It shapes the workshops and the meetings that we hold. It shapes publications that come out from our staff, as well as other resources like webinar series or other gray material that we produce to really advance the science of environmental health, to facilitate or encourage people to live the strategic plan and the work that they do, and to guide the decisions that we make inform the decisions that we make as an institute. So just to remind you of the content of the current strategic plan, it's highlighting 3 major themes. The first is advancing environmental health sciences. That's a lot of the actual research activities will track to theme 1. Theme 2 is much more of the translational aspect of how do we encourage the translation from data to knowledge to action in the research that we do. And theme 3 is much more about the stewardship and support. It includes a lot of our career development, our training activities, as well as some of our infrastructure goals as an institute. So there are a total of 19 goals across these 3 themes that are in the current strategic plan. And as I said, we use those to drive the development of our funding opportunities as an institute. All of these are shaped by the strategic plan, and most of them actually will cover more than one element of the strategic plan. So here we see the 19 individual goals and all of the one-time requests for applications that DERT participated in over the last 6 years. So these are just our one-time RFAs, and I want to highlight just one that I'm going to be discussing in a little bit more detail, our RESTORE program, our inflammation resolution, that not only does that fit into the biological research element of the strategic plan, but it also advances our goals of generating knowledge from data and addressing emerging issues in environmental health sciences. So most of our RFAs will cover more than one goal. And just completing the list of our RFAs, these are our repeat RFAs, those that are continuation of existing programs. And here we'll highlight our core centers RFA, which you'll hear more from Claudia Thompson about this afternoon, which really does touch every aspect of the work that we do as NAEHS. So while it's primarily associated with encouraging collaborative science within theme 3, it really does advance all aspects of the strategic plan. So let's just walk through each of the themes and present some select, these are just little vignettes, some select accomplishments for each of the theme elements, just to highlight some of the work that we have done. Again, a reminder, we think of this in 5 different categories of the work that we do, and you'll see on each slide some little icons that reflect whether this is work that's done through a collaboration, through funding, through meetings, through publications, or through other resources that we're making available to the community. So the first thing I want to highlight is in theme 1, our biological research, and this is really kind of building on the insight that came when we discovered this class of chemicals called the resolvins that indicate that the resolution of inflammation is not just the acute inflammatory signal going away, that it is an actively regulated biological process. And so we can change our mindset from the way we've often thought about our therapeutic approach to managing inflammation by encouraging anti-inflammatory therapeutics that serve to decrease the initial onset of or the peak of inflammation. And sometimes that peak of inflammation is actually what you want to accomplish. That in an acute inflammatory setting, you want that inflammation to encourage the wound repair of the insult. And if we can think about strategies to encourage resolution as opposed to decreasing inflammation, we can have that high peak, encourage that wound healing activity, but also decrease the total amount of inflammation that occurs by encouraging resolution. But in order to do that, we need to understand what is the fundamental biology of inflammation resolution, and where does environmental exposure impact that? Where are environmental exposures altering? Are they delaying resolution, or is there a way of using them to encourage resolution? So we partnered with several other institutes to organize a workshop here at NAEHS in 2019 to really talk about the fundamental biology of inflammation resolution. That led to the development of a notice of scientific interest, a NOSI, that was released in 2020, that has led to the funding of several R21 and R01 applications across. I think there are 5 institutes that participate in that NOSI. It also led to the development of our own NIEHS Restore program that really encouraged that work. So the NOSI is a very general NOSI focused on understanding the biology of inflammation resolution, and then Restore brings that specifically into environmentally related disease and understanding the impact of environmental exposures on resolution, primarily in the pulmonary domain, but spreading out across the breadth of our portfolio through subsequent investigator-initiated research. It also led to a publication that Jackie Marzek and Sri Nadador authored in 2022 that really kind of reviewed the current state of the science and the impact of inflammation and resolution in a number of different diseases as mediators of environmentally induced disease. The second thing I want to highlight is our in theme 1 is our activities in understanding individual susceptibility. This kind of builds on some of the discussion that we had yesterday. And really our focus over the last 6 years has been much more on understanding the advancing the field of epigenetics and the role of epigenetics as a key mediator of environmental exposure. So highlighting our Target 2 consortium and their activities that really have worked to systematically map the epigenetic response to multiple exposures in multiple tissues and different phenotypic outcomes associated with those exposures, and creating that as a data source that is available to the broader community to really encourage environmental epigenetic analysis beyond. So I understand from Fred that the Keystone manuscript from the Target 2 consortium is in the works and is expected to be published anytime. We've also kind of expanded from that epigenetic work to really look at not only the modification of DNA molecules, but looking at the epitranscriptomics and the modification of RNA molecules and the impact of environmental exposure on kind of the concordance between the gene expression, the appearance of an mRNA, and the translation of that signal into a protein. So this has really been another area of understanding fundamental biology that has focused on the role of environmental exposure as a key factor. So in 2017, we started encouraging this within our portfolio. And since 2017, our portfolio has grown from 0 active grants to 38 total grants that we've awarded over the last 7 years in epitranscriptomics work. And that has also led to things like that National Academies report and the EPCOT program that Fred has been working on, and that should be released publicly in the next few weeks, I would expect. And then we've been continuing that partnership with NHGRI that Eric Green discussed yesterday through a number of workshops that we've held at NIH and through the National Academies to really think about where is RNA biology fit in the broader NIH landscape, as well as specifically here at NIEHS. And that work has, of course, led to the development of a whole new area of science, precision environmental health, that was a term first coined by Andrea Baccarelli, Dana Dolinoy, and Cheryl Walker, based on their conversations in the Target 2 Consortium. Thinking about how we can use multi-omic analysis and data integration to elucidate the mechanisms by which environmental exposures cause disease, developing biomarkers of exposure and disease risk at the level of the individual in order to identify strategies to take action at the individual level, whether that's a therapeutic strategy, a behavioral or a policy intervention that can improve the health of that individual. The third element from theme one that I want to highlight is our activities around the exposome. So our landmark program in the exposome has been the HERE program, a collaboration between NIEHS, NHLBI, NCI, and the ECHO program. That was launched in 2019 as an infrastructure to provide access to high-end analytical capabilities in exposure science and the exposome, but also thinking about the development of the methods to advance exposome science, as well as the data science needs, the ontology and the data repository, to be able to make this data available to the broader community. And those efforts have led to a number of different meetings, highlighting here a workshop that we held in 2021 on geospatial analysis and integration of geospatial exposure data into epidemiological studies, environmental health studies, and also our 2022 Exposome workshop series that was 6 different mini workshops that had a total of 400 participants, many of whom are council members and much broader community participation in those, and a number of publications that have come out as a series as a consequence of these workshops. That in turn has informed and really spearheaded our collaborations to get exposome science embedded within the work of our sister institutes at NIH. So we partnered with the Aging Institute in 2023 to bring some of their resources in Alzheimer's disease and related dementias to the exposome, with a $15 million investment in exposomics from NIA. Our partnership with the Neurology Institute and working with them as they've established their Office of Neural Exposomics, the One Talks group led by David Jett at Neurology, and some solicitations that they have been working on. a partnership last year with with NAEHS and the Office of Autoimmune Research that Lisa Ryder discussed yesterday. Really looking at, or setting the table for some comprehensive analysis of the role of the exposome in autoimmune disease, both etiology and severity and progression of autoimmune disease. And then our continuing partnerships, providing exposomic analysis to the ECHO program, to the CURE consortium with NIDDK, looking at the etiology of chronic kidney disease, and our partnership with the All of Us research program to pilot, scale, implement exposome, exposure science data using geospatial data, but also the exposomic analysis leveraging our HERE capacity. And then, of course, continuing to implement some of the recommendations of our workshop series, with the #1 recommendation being that we need to establish a global community of practice around the exposome to focus on operationalizing the exposome and addressing the need for both analytical methodology standardization, but also the data sharing and integration aspects of the exposome. So this is not a research program, it's a coordination program that we have just recently awarded. Again, that has 6 different institutes that are supporting the community of practice, and its partnership with the European funded International Human Exposome Network that will be going to Europe next week to meet with them or next month to meet with them and coordinate activities across the pond and around the globe. Then the final thing I want to highlight within theme 1 is our activities around advancing data science and making environmental health data fair. This has really touched much of the work, if not all of the work that we have done in DERT, has been a major emphasis of our activities. So going back to 2019, the Superfund Research Program funded put an $8 million investment into collaborative projects to link the data generated between our Superfund P42s to enhance data integration, operability, and reuse of our Superfund data, setting the table for the addition of the data management cores to the Superfund program. As I mentioned, we did a workshop on geospatial data in exposure and integrating that into population health studies that led to a publication led by Yusha Tree. We also held our workshop with the All of Us program in 22, in addition to the exposome workshop that really looked at how do we integrate environmental data into the All of Us and particularly into their data repository. So they are completely committed to the fair data principles and making all of the data that is generated within the All of Us available to the broader community for secondary analysis and reuse. We also just last year supported an RFA focused on the broader environmental health sciences data landscape, focused on creating data and metadata standards to inform the data resources that we are generating through other support in partnership with the Office of Data Science at NIH. And then also I want to highlight the activities of our cohort maintenance program, our U24, that has really throughout the iteration of that program has focused on making our epidemiological data fair and interoperable, so that as the requirement for having data management and sharing plans came online, our EPI studies were already ready to comply with the new policies. So translating now into theme 2 and our work to promote translation from data to knowledge to action. This has really been guided by our work to establish the translational research framework within NIEHS. So changing the mindset of translation from the traditional NIH mindset of bench to bedside and back to thinking about translation as the movement of research from one domain to another, from fundamental questions, from whether that's technology development or mechanistically oriented research into epidemiological, community engaged research, and the development of interventions based on practice, and then the impact assessment of the work that we do. And this translational research framework has been integrated into many of our, if not all of our large center programs, including our children's translational centers. There's a continuation of the children's centers. Our P30 environmental health sciences course centers are embedded in the translational research framework and have a requirement since 2022 to include a translational research core as one of their facilities. And then, of course, our Superfund research program also has their research translation course that require a community engagement activity within the P42 efforts. So this has led to the direct impact of the work that we do at NIEHS on policy and regulation. So the research that was supported by NIEHS was directly used to inform EPA's drinking water regulation standard, initially proposed in 2022 and implemented earlier this year. It also was used to inform the National Academy's report on guidance for integration of PFAS into clinical disease management, testing, and clinical follow-up based on PFAS exposure. So this is only one of the few cases where there is a clinical guidance around environmental exposure assessment, which is, I think, a huge impact of the research that we do at NIEHS, stemming from mechanistic and fundamental research to direct impact on human health. I also want to highlight within our health disparities and environmental justice aspect of theme 2, our research to action program, which requires partnerships between the research activities being conducted by a university with the community needs. So the research is informed by and addressing the community concerns, and creates an action plan to utilize those research findings to improve the health of that impacted community. So one specific vignette to highlight here is our Safe and Just Cleaners program in New York, where they worked with the university conducted a survey of Latinx household cleaners and on their use and awareness of the chemicals that they are using in their cleaning products. And specifically around the COVID-19 pandemic, where they were using much more disinfectants, and understanding the impact of those choices on their exposures and potential health, and strategies that they can use to decrease their exposure while still achieving their mission of providing a clean and healthy facility. I also want to highlight in our health disparities and environmental justice something that I think Eric mentioned very briefly in his presentation yesterday, is our commitment to ethics and the principle of autonomy and ownership of research results by the participants in the research. So this is a partnership that we have with the Human Genome Research Institute, as well as the NIH Office of Science Policy, where so this began as a discussion in the Partnerships for Environmental Public Health. as kind of that a presentation from Julia Brody, kind of outlining their Derby tool and the fundamental importance of return of results. That led to a council discussion that we held in 2022, June of 2022, to really highlight this, and the workshop that we organized with NHGRI and OSP that ultimately led to our new RFA, which we just held the first grantee meeting of our return of results program this summer here in Broadbell. So again, just to kind of present one vignette here, or a summary of the work that we're doing. So it's looking at a range of different exposures from wastewater treatment, personal care products, to normal household or occupational exposures in a variety of different audiences or target populations, including tribal populations, underserved minority, including rural versus urban communities, and focus on developing toolkits and capacity, kind of leveraging some of the conversation that we had with council on, how do we not just present an exposure number, but putting that number into a context of what does it mean for your health, and the idea of there being environmental counselors who can work with the community to understand what that data means. Changing to the theme of emerging environmental health issues. So this is probably the largest topic I will be talking about today. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about our climate change and health initiative. We've highlighted this at council many times, but this has been a large NIH-wide effort to coordinate activities around the health impacts of climate change through a number of different funding opportunities as well as other activities. And it's not just been around the funding through the dedicated appropriations that we've gotten, but it's impacted or been supported by other activities that we've had, such as our PEPH, where they've hosted a meeting focused specifically on climate change and health. Our worker training program has developed a number of training activities for workers in heat stress and other climate-related exposures. And we've done a number of outreach activities through our podcasts to discuss the impact and kind of future activities of climate change and health. Another one that I want to highlight, I've presented on this to council before as well, but it's a reminder that I and Annette Giuseppe-Eli from EPA are co-chairs of the OSTP activities on interagency coordination of research around contaminants of emerging concern. So this is a partnership of 16 different federal agencies to coordinate our activities to really, I think this boils down to decreasing the time between when we identify a contaminant of emerging concern, understand what are the potential risks associated with that, and what are the potential mitigation strategies that we can use to decrease that burden of exposure and improve the quality of life and health of all of the American individuals. So this is the National Emerging Contaminants Research Initiative strategic plan, which has 5 specific goals to really facilitate coordination of research between government agencies, and it explicitly includes a focus on community engagement and partnership and risk communication as part of the work that we are doing in contaminants of emerging concern. And we'll also hear more about the East Palestine train derailment this afternoon from Takara. but we had a very active response to the train derailment. We, along with several other institutes, NIH sponsored National Academy's virtual workshop to generate recommendations and outline scientific research priorities based on the derailment, which included the award of 6 time-sensitive projects that have analyzed a number of exposures and set the table for a longer, more comprehensive research activity to understand the impact of that disaster on the health of that community. And of course, there's been a lot of focus, not only at NIEHS, but across the federal government on the emerging concerns around micro and nanoplastics in the environment and their potential impact on health. It seems every time we read a journal, we see another article that says there are potential health impacts associated with these. So we've been very active in this area. We've in our partnership with NSF on the oceans and human health, we have a center that is focused specifically on plastic pollution and climate change to advance this science. We've supported a number of small business technologies to improve exposure analysis and particle characterization for micro and nanoplastics. We released a NOC to encourage this research and have seen a number of applications come in to begin looking at this research. And we've done a podcast kind of outlining what is the current state of science on microplastics and human health. And then transitioning to theme 3, which is enhancing environmental health sciences through stewardship and support. Just a few stories to tell here. A lot of this is focused on our efforts to improve the career pathway for those who have had a hard time navigating and finding opportunities to thrive within the research landscape. So we made a commitment very early on in the strategic plan to increase our support for our diversity supplement scholars. So we've between 2018 and 2023, we've more than doubled our investment in our diversity scholars program. And I think for fiscal 24, we're not done yet, but I think we will exceed $6 million in investment in our diversity scholars program. But it's not just about funding the supplements and letting them get involved in a research activity and then pursue their own career. We've really tried to nurture our trainees. So we established our Driven Network, which is a virtual engagement network of all of the trainees that are supported by our diversity supplements, building partnerships or relationships between them and our program staff, them with each other, so they have a network of peers that they can share lessons learned, best practices. We've held a number of listening sessions with HBCUs and other MSIs to really learn what their needs are, where the opportunities are for integrating them into the work that we do. We expanded the scope of our U24 cohort maintenance program in 2022 to specifically focus on enhancing workforce diversity as well as the diversity of the cohorts that we are supporting. And then we have continued our support for the R25 UP program. So this is our undergraduate research training program that specifically encourages undergraduate research involving researchers of underrepresented backgrounds to come into the environmental health sciences. We've also had a significant focus on workforce diversity within our worker training program. So they have spearheaded initiatives to encourage women to come into construction trades, to build capacity within our tribal communities, to handle hazardous materials and respond to the various emergencies that impact our tribal nations, building capacity for some of those emerging concerns, such as the lithium-ion batteries and the EV industry, and also focused on opportunities to create jobs and just show, I think this is my last story, is really looking at this summer, the worker training program published their evaluation of the return on investment of the environmental career worker training program. And this is really remarkable, that over the life of the program, they're approaching a 30-fold return on investment. So every dollar that goes into their training programs returns 28-fold reinvestment in those communities themselves. And that is through the creation of skilled, high-paying jobs, but also downstream impacts on improved safety costs, decreased hiring costs, and decreased recidivism. So crime-related costs of really using this as a bridge to rehabilitation for formerly incarcerated people who can now have a productive career. So this is I think just a major impact and real success that I think Sharon and the group deserve massive kudos for the work that they do. With that, I will close out just with setting a theme that these are all stepping stones towards the future of environmental health sciences. And you'll see that the impact of much of the work that we've done over the last 7 years in implementing the strategic plan really sets the stage for the new priorities of our new strategic plan. And we look forward to identifying some future priorities based on the work that we're going to be doing over the next 5 years to implement the new strategic plan. With that, I will say thank you, everyone, for your attention. I think I have time for maybe 1 or 2 quick questions, but we've built in a period for discussion after Rick's presentation. So are there any quick questions from council based on the accomplishments, or should we move on over to Rick's presentation to lay out our new strategic plan?
Any points of clarification on anything that David just mentioned? I don't see any hands. So if Nathan, if you could share my slides, then okay. Well, thanks, David, for providing a pretty extensive summary of the major accomplishments that we've had over the past 5 years. I think our strategic plan has served us well. It's part of the reason why when I became director in 2020, I decided we're not going to do a new strategic planning exercise then, because I felt that the strategic plan was serving us well. But now here we are, and I'll be talking primarily today about the emerging new, well, not the emerging strategic plan, the strategic plan. You've seen a copy of this. We provided this to you in advance, and hopefully it's clear that we will be building on many of the successes that we've had in the past. But one of the things I just want to state right up front is one of the personal motivations for me in the strategic plan is really bringing environmental health sciences to the broader biomedical enterprise. You know, we all heard a presentation from Eric Green yesterday about NHGRI. And I think it was Francis and Eric who really brought genetics and genomics out of the silo of work that's being supported by NHGRI and really reduced it to practice. So it's valuable tools that are being used across the NIH and across the biomedical spectrum. So I want to do the same thing with environment. And why are we doing that? Because the environment influences human health. We've got to figure out ways to integrate the work that we do in environmental health, integrating this into the fabric of the way that we study the etiology of human disease. So a lot of the elements of our strategic plan going forward really involve, collaborative efforts. You heard some of this from David. I think some of our IC directors are now using the term exposomics. And what we want to do is get to the point where we can actually share, reduce this to practice, help operationalize some of the things we do at NAEHS so they can be used broadly across the NIH. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, well, before I go into the strategic plan, of course, there are always questions about the budget. So we have information that's coming in from the House, and it's unfortunate the news about the appropriation for our Superfund program is not good. So we took a hit in 2024, and it looks like the House bill for Superfund in FY25 will be another about another $4.7 million hit to the budget. So we'll be down 4.7 million in FY25 compared to 24. So it's so when we compare it to 23, that's a big chunk of money that is no longer part of that program. Now, this is really totally perplexing to me. When I have a chance to get out in front of Republicans, Democrats, House and Senate and talk about the Superfund program, especially that worker training program, some of the metrics on this are just out of sight. And so they were very complimentary of the work that we do and very appreciative of the high quality science and getting out into the community. But they just mentioned, look, these are just budgetary realities. So the environment and this is a different allocation for us. So it's very competitive. So they're going to try see what they can do in future years. But for FY25, it's not looking good. So now the FY25 House bill for the NIH is complicated, because what they're proposing is that the NIH, before they give us any money, before the NIH gets this funding, we're going to have to reorganize into 15 institutes and centers. I know that many of you have heard about this in the past. Whether this will actually happen in the next several months or not is unclear. So we are slated then to merge together with NIMHD and CCHI, NINR, and Fogarty International. So the good news here is that our overall budget for this aggregated center would be about $2 billion, and there would be an increase of about 20 million to support the work that's happening across these 5 different institutes and centers. But we don't have a lot of the details. We don't know how much of that specifically would be used to support the type of work that NIEHS traditionally does. So we'll have to see what happens. And I think a lot of this will also be a function of what happens in November. So let's go to the next slide. So with respect to the Senate FY25 allocation, so they're proposing a 1.9 million increase from FY24 levels. So this would be for the Superfund bill. And so that's, the Senate is understanding that the fabulous work that's being done, but this still puts us at about $1.4 million less than the president's budget. So again, we'll just have to kind of ride out the storm here relative to the funding for Superfund. For the HHS, the Senate is basically coming in and they're giving us a flat budget. And the word that I'm getting from Dr. Bertinelli and Dr. Tabak is that compared to other federal agencies, flat is good. So we'll just have to figure out how do we manage with increased costs. Research is expensive. And as all of you know, in your organizations, the cost of doing business is going up. So if we don't have an increase in our budget, that means we'll be doing less with the available money that we have. Next slide. Okay, let me focus now on the new strategic plan. And so go to the next slide. Yeah, so we've, as part of our planning efforts, and my colleagues have reminded me that I've taken you through all the details on this multiple times in the past several council meetings, so I'm not going to provide all those details again, so I apologize for the new members of council. But we reached out, we got input from across the global environmental health sciences, and so we have this input, and we're synthesizing this, and we've come up with just different areas of scientific focus and other elements of our strategic plan. But one of the first things we did was really thought carefully about our mission and our vision. So we've changed that. So our mission, and I worked together with the senior leadership team to actually come up with this language. So the mission of NAEHS is to conduct research on how the environment affects biological systems across the lifespan, and to translate this knowledge to reduce disease and promote human health. So it's reducing disease and promoting human health is really a key element of our mission. And the vision of NAEHS is to provide global leadership for innovative research that improves the health of people and communities. And I think it's important to point out here that we're working on a global scale here, because the environmental issues that we study in the United States, or the environmental issues that we're interested in, are not confined just to the 50 states in the United States. So we're working on a global scale. Next slide. So this is a diagram that our colleagues in OCPL came up with. I talked to you about the 6 different areas of scientific focus. So these are the research areas of focus here on the left. We also have capacity and infrastructure issues, and scientific management and stewardship. And these are all interconnected. So it was a challenge to come up with a diagram that illustrates that these are not standalone efforts, that all of this work in the 6 different areas of scientific focus all interact with each other. So that, keep that in mind as, I'm presenting the strategic plan. There are a couple of overarching themes. So the diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and civility is a key one, and I'll talk about this in the next slide, as well as solutions-based research and translation. So next slide. So with respect to those cross-cutting themes, we are absolutely convinced, the senior leadership committee here, and I'm sure that all of you at your post institutions recognize that the best workforces are the diverse workforces where there's equity, inclusion, accessibility, and we've tossed in civility. Civility being how we treat each other on a daily basis. So that's a cross-cutting theme, everything that we do with respect to personnel management as part of our strategic plan, and managing NAEHS embraces the DEIAC cross-cutting theme. And we're also very interested in not just doing work that we can publish in high-profile journals, but we want to then develop translational elements of this. David referred to our translational scheme that we've come up with, which is different than what other ICs use. But it's really about solutions-focused research and translation. So conduct the research around the 6 areas of scientific focus, and to develop translational elements where we can truly impact public health and the practice of medicine. So next slide. Let me now go into that first area, the 6 areas of scientific focus, precision environmental health, exposomics, mechanistic biology and toxicology, climate change, impacts on human health, environmental health disparities, and environmental justice and health equity, and data science and computational biology. Now, next slide. Now, again, I'm not today going to go into all of the details. We've been through these in the past, so I'm just going to just quickly refresh everyone's memory about the work that we're doing in these 6 different areas of scientific focus, and then refer to the translational goal that hopefully you've read as part of our strategic plan. So exposomics is a major area of focus. You saw that from the work that David described from our past strategic plan. So the concept of the exposome, I think as we all know, was originally advanced by Chris Wilde back in 2005. So this was right after the Genome Project was completed. And there was this recognition the Genome Project was really about getting beyond one gene at a time. So Chris and others within the environmental health sciences community maintain that if we truly want to understand the impact of the environment, we need to embrace the exposome concept, which is to study the totality of exposures, from physical and chemical exposures and those relating to the social determinants of health. And yes, the exposome does include social determinants of health. So any of those who you weren't aware of that, some of my Institute and Center directors weren't aware of that, but it does include that. And we need to be studying these physical, chemical, social determinants of health, and we need to be doing this over the life course. So in the end, as you can see on the slide here, the translational goal is to develop a more complete picture of positive and negative environmental effects on health, including disease, risk, progression, severity, and management. And also, in fact, one thing that it was kind of an insight for me is that taking an exposome framework means not only studying all the bad stuff that may be associated with physical and chemical exposures, but there may be good things in the social determinants of health. How about good diet, lack of psychosocial stress, good sleep? And can some of these good elements in the social determinants of health actually mitigate some of the negative effects associated with the physical and chemical exposures? So let's go to the next slide. So this is the precision environmental health, and this is all about studying the variability and how individuals respond to environmental exposures. So it builds on the concept of the precision medicine program, but it's unlike the precision medicine program. It's not just about genetics. Genetics does play a role in differential responses to the environment, but there's also the environment. There are epigenetic changes. So precision environmental health includes epigenetic analysis and environmental exposures. And I know, as David indicated, we first heard about this from Walker, Baccarelli, and Dolonoy. And actually, the first time I heard when they gave a presentation to council a few years ago. So PEH is defined, and I think it was Cheryl who commented that it's PEH is about G by E by D. So it's genes by the environment, along with the huge data management that is associated with this program. You're talking about large data sets for environmental exposures, coupled with epigenetic data sets, coupled with genetic data sets. There's a lot of data that needs to be managed. So as you see on the slide here, in the end, the translational goal of PEH is to better understand, manage, and communicate environmental risks in both general and clinical settings based on individual susceptibilities. So let's go to the next slide. So in the area of mechanistic biology and toxicology, so this is really all about understanding the underlying molecular mechanisms through which environmental agents affect human biology. So it goes beyond some of the existing traditional toxicology testing involving, say, outbred rats and being exposed to physical and chemical exposures. Rather, it will increasingly rely on just developing mechanistic insights. So what do we know about the molecular pathways and the biochemical networks within human biology that are impacted by environmental exposures? And it could be that there are multiple different environmental exposures when we're studying it in the context of an exposome framework. So my prediction is that this will increasingly rely on some of those new approach methodologies, the NAMs, that and I'll talk about this in just a couple of slides, but the NAMs is developing new NAMs will be developed as part of this new complementary common fund project. So understanding the mechanisms will be critically important for ultimately ushering in the era of predictive toxicology. We talked a lot about predictive toxicology. Now, over the next 5 years, we have an opportunity to bring the molecular understanding and then overlay this and really get the whole predictive toxicology, maturing that field, building on the successes that we've had in the past, and really expanding this. So in the end, as you see on the slide here, the translational goal is focused on how discovering the molecular mechanisms underlying the biological impacts of environmental exposures will help to identify strategies to improve individual and population health. So let's go to the next slide. Well, hopefully it's apparent that all of the research that's part of these 6 different areas of scientific focus, they're all very, very data intensive. And so we have created the Office of Environmental Science Cyber Infrastructure, or OESC, and we have hired a director of this office, and we have hired a chief data scientist. So OESC is being charged with developing plans to make sure that we can proactively manage our cyber infrastructure. Everything we do in the context of the cyber infrastructure is expensive and it's complicated. And we need to be doing this both within the intramural program and developing the plans that can be used across the external biomedical community. And the plan needs to be maintained in a way that, our whole cyber infrastructure needs to be maintained in a way that will facilitate the seamless sharing of high quality and well-curated data. And we need to be doing this across the entire global biomedical spectrum. The translational goal, as you see it here, is to have a data infrastructure that will enable more precise identification and understanding of the complex causal relationships between environmental exposures and health impacts, and translation of scientific discovery into actionable knowledge. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, in the area of health disparities and environmental justice. So this is a huge scientific priority for NAEHS going forward. And as David shared with you, this has been an area that we've made a lot of progress. So historically, NAEHS, I think, is probably one of the first ICs to really embrace EJ and advance the science of EJ. So we've done a lot, but it's clear that there's a lot more that we need to do. So most notably, I want to point out, under the leadership of our Deputy Director, Dr. Trevor Archer, NIHS is taking the lead to organize an NIH-wide effort to tackle the issues related to health disparities and environmental justice. So this it's the NIH-wide effort, involves expanding the existing health disparity centers to very clearly include environmental justice. They're also talking about launching an environmental justice scholars program and providing also a mechanism to help train investigators and communities on the topic of environmental justice. So implementing on this area of our strategic plan will ultimately give us a full application of as you see here, the translational goal is a full application of the knowledge gained to ultimately achieve environmental justice and health equity for all. So one of the things that I will add here is that, as a very important part of this is getting myself and Dr. Archer and other members of senior leadership up in front of the environmental justice community, listening to their concerns, and then crafting strategies to address their concerns. And the one thing we're discovering is that NIEHS and the NIH can't do cleanup of certain sites, but what we can do is bring in an all-of-government approach, where we bring in the EPA, we bring in the Department of Defense, we bring in other parts of the federal government with this all-of-government approach, and then develop plans to actually clean up these environmental justice communities and actually satisfy some of their concerns. So stay tuned, a lot of work that needs to be done on that. So next slide. So it's, as it relates to the whole issue of climate change and health, David indicated we've done a lot in the last 5 years. And NIEHS is, historically was one of the ICs that funded, I think, the majority of grants that study the health impacts of climate change. But with President Biden's issuance of Executive Order 14008, which was about addressing the climate crisis at home and abroad, So we realized that this is much bigger than what just NAEHS could tackle on our own. In fact, there are lots of reasons why it just made a lot of sense for us to develop partnerships with the other institutes and centers. So we took the lead to develop an NIH-wide collaborative effort to address the direct and the indirect effects on human health associated with climate change. As part of this effort, a strategy was developed with 4 core elements: health effects research, health equity, intervention science, and training and capacity building. So as you can see here on the slide, the translational goal is to reduce related health threats and impacts, especially amongst those most at risk, and build health resilience to climate change impacts amongst individuals, communities, and nations around the world. So next slide. Now moving into that second area of our strategic plan around capacity and infrastructure. So on the first bullet point here is we need to continue to develop training opportunities to bring more investigators and communities into the field of environmental health sciences. So most importantly, we'll apply the principles of DEIAC in a way that will allow us to recruit and train and manage the environmental health sciences workforce. And as part of our training platforms, we will be certain to set the stage to ensure that investigators can work collaboratively across the global community, really engaging in the types of team sciences on steroids. So it's a lot of the things we do, and we require a lot of multidisciplinary and collaborative efforts. And as I indicated, one of the 6 areas of scientific focus involves developing strategies to manage our complex data sets, and to do this in a way that we can seamlessly share data across the global environmental health and biomedical communities. So the only way that we can ever hope to take advantage of the new AI and ML tools is to make sure that we have a reliable and high quality data infrastructure to use for AI and ML applications. So from the standpoint of human studies and community engaged research, human studies represent a major ongoing investment for NIEHS. I think you heard that from David in his summary of what we've done over the past 5 years. Specific attention will be given to our ability to manage the valuable information collected through past and current studies, and to ascertain and address the barriers that will prevent robust development of specialized new studies. So one opportunity going forward is to bring environmental exposures into well-studied cohorts that are currently not collecting environmental data. And I think, as many of you may have seen, the All of Us program is one that was not collecting environmental data, and we're working to fix that. So in this context, we want to be certain that we support research that studies health across the lifespan, and it's got to be across the lifespan. And we will continue to focus on making sure that we will study diversity across individuals. And we absolutely must include a consideration of women's health and sex as a biological variable. So we need to continue to engage with communities in a way that will accommodate diverse viewpoints, especially those from environmental justice communities. And the next bullet point here, as I've alluded to in my description of the exposome, NIEHS will continue to innovate in the area of capturing environmental exposures in accordance with the exposome framework. By doing this, we expect to develop new risk assessment methodologies that can be used for setting standards and interpreting data. And finally, in the category of capacity and infrastructure, communication and dissemination of research results is a critical element of our strategic plan. So we will be focusing on dissemination of research across the scientific and clinical communities. So we need to focus on the dissemination of health promotion information to both general audiences and to other key stakeholders like Congress, our appropriators, advocacy groups, and the news media, and others. So let's go to the next slide. Just in the remaining minutes here on our strategic plan, I'll also touch on some of the bullet points here on the scientific management and stewardship. So in the context, in the context of scientific management and stewardship, the NIH-wide strategic plan emphasizes that the NIH has a responsibility to uphold public trust and confidence in the work that we do. So NIEHS will build on its long history of community engaged research, and we will continue to work to ensure public trust by enhancing public understanding of NIEHS supported research and research programs. And David referred to the terrific work that we've been doing on report back of research results, which I think will be a real catalytic effort to engage communities and to understand the work that we're doing. So additionally, NIEHS has had a longstanding commitment to sustainability in all of its operations. So we use sustainability principles and actions in the efficient management of utilities, supplies, and other resources that are critical to advancing our research portfolio. So a great example of this is the work that is overseen by our executive officer. And it's really our net zero warehouse. So Ingrid Mathis is overseeing this together with her colleagues, across NIEHS. And I'll just comment that, this net zero warehouse, this is the only one that I'm aware of. And Jay, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think it's the only one at the NIH and possibly even at HHS. And also the next time you're on campus, so it won't be in February, but it would be in June, take a look at the new solar panels that we have just installed that will allow us to charge electric vehicles in the main parking lot. So we put our commitment to environmental, our commitment to the environment to actually practice in the way that we operate our infrastructure. Now, as part of our strategic plan, NIEHS will continue to maintain capabilities for program evaluations and other assessment activities. David took you through that. So we have capabilities where we actually couple, the grants that we fund with, the strategic elements in our strategic plan. So we will also continue to work, establish and continue to use measures and track assessments to evaluate progress on implementing all elements of our strategic plan. And I should comment that now that we have our strategic plan in place, the next phase, I've been meeting with the Senior Leadership Committee on a monthly basis, and we are now talking about the implementation plans. What are the things we're going to be doing to implement on the various elements of our strategic plan? But finally, before I end here, NIEHS will continue to embrace this leadership core value. So we will continue to embrace the 4 core leadership values that I originally developed in collaboration with all of my colleagues. These were 5 leadership values that I promoted, and again, we developed when I first became the director of NIEHS back in 2020. So in brief, we will continue to promote collaboration to identify opportunities for partnership with other organizations across the global biomedical spectrum, most notably with the 26 other institutes and centers across the NIH. We will continue to identify opportunities for internal and transparent exchange of information that is built on mutual trust, respect, and inclusion, and we will continue to promote an environment where all people are empowered to use their talents, strengths, and expertise for leadership and accountability. As far as innovation is concerned, NIEHS will aim to engage staff and external parties in generating forward-thinking and cutting-edge ideas for solving current and emerging challenges in environmental health sciences. And finally, we will continue to maintain our commitment to an inclusive, diverse, and a well-prepared workforce where perspectives are respected and valued, leadership and staff embrace diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and civility. So again, I maintain, as do my colleagues on the Senior Leadership Committee, the best workforce is one that embraces the principles of DEIAC. So let's go to the next slide. So I just want to take a few minutes here and update you on some of the things that have been happening across the NIH and things that I've been personally involved with, together with my colleagues on the senior leadership and across the NIEHS. So next slide. So again, as I mentioned, as part of our strategic plan, I want to make sure that I'm getting out in front of other IC directors and talking about our strategic plan, and talking about ways that we can be working in a collaborative mode, really driving innovation and bringing environmental sciences into the way that they study the etiology of human disease. So I've done this with a number of IC directors in just the last, I think, couple of months. I met with Dr. Tromberg, Dr. Rutter, Eric and I have had longstanding discussions around gene by environment effects. Dr. Webster Syriac, who's the acting, well, she's the deputy director of NIDCR, but she's the acting director of NIDCR. And also, I've been meeting with Kathleen Neuzeld, who is the relatively new director of the Fogarty International Center. So she has been working very closely with me on much of the work on the climate change and health. And it's just been a real pleasure meeting with them. So I'm not just relying on sending them the strategic plan and asking them to read it. I'm actually sitting down with them, as I did, for example, last week with Bruce Tromberg. We sat down over lunch and we went through the elements of the strategic plan. And he had some remarkable insights about things that we can be doing in the area of the exposome. He's very excited about it, but he's really relying on us to kind of reduce it to practice, to operationalize the exposome so that he better understands what are the technologies that he can actually bring to the table. So I learned from him and actually from Dr. Rutter about quantum biosensors. So these are not quantum dots, but it's a different technology, an emerging new technology that may be extremely valuable in the whole exposome, operationalizing the exposome. Next slide. And also I've been out, getting out and meeting with our congressional representatives. And so, I mentioned that I've met with the four corners, Republicans, Democrats, House and Senate. And any opportunity that I have to actually get out in front of House members, Representative Stevenson from Michigan was very interested in knowing what are we doing with micro and nanoplastics. So I met with her and summarized what we know and primarily what we don't know about the health effects. But we're working on developing, as David indicated, developing, cross-government approaches to tackle this very complicated issue of micro and nanoplastics. But Congresswomen Valerie Foushee and Deborah Ross were visiting us here at NAEHS. And I don't know if you can see the, in fact, I'm having a problem seeing it here. Actually, David, if you can see it, can you actually read the tweet? I just can't see it on my laptop screen. It's very positive.
Let's see what my readers allow me to do. So it was a great visit to the NIEHS Durham campus to learn more about the research funding being conducted in their facilities in RTP. Congress must continue to federally support these labs that conduct valuable and life-saving research on women's health and environmental illness.
Yep. Well, it's good to know that members of Congress are very supportive of the work that we do and the work that's happening across the NIH. I've also had a chance, I've had many different opportunities over the past several months to interact with our appropriators. And I think one noteworthy example, I don't have a slide for this, but a noteworthy example was a meeting at the Library of Congress. And actually, if you've never been there, I can strongly suggest go and walk into the main hall at the Library of Congress. It's actually spectacular, but it was a phenomenal evening. Dr. Bertinelli was there, had a chance to actually speak about her vision, which she shared with us yesterday. But there was a lot of support. Representative Jeffries came in and pounded on the podium and how we need to get more money to the NIH to support the fabulous work that they're doing. So there's a lot of support for the work that we do at the NIH, which is very encouraging. Next slide. And David alluded to the fact that we were able to host the Tribal Advisory Committee, the TAC, and this happened in late June. And I was really pleased about this. It gave us a chance to talk about the work that we do at NIEHS around community engagement and how we listen to tribal communities. And we embrace the principles. Liam O'Fallon had a big part of organizing this meeting. And I think it summarized it well when toward the end of the meeting, one of the members of the group, and Liam, I don't know if Liam is on, but maybe could chime in here, but one of the members of the group kind of looked at the chair and said, why is it that we didn't know about NIEHS and the fabulous work that they're doing prior to this meeting? So, well, they do now. And so I think that there will be just a greater awareness of the work that we do. It was a chance for me to meet with Dr. Walters, who is the new chair of the TAC. And so I'll be meeting with her at some point when I'm in Bethesda and just talking about how we can be working more collaboratively together in the future. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, and in the area of climate change and health, it's really good to know that they've asked that there was a White House Climate and Health Forum. So Dr. Coleman was there together with Dr. Aubrey Miller was there talking about the NIH-wide collaboration, the initiative on studying the climate change and health, but also Dr. Bertinelli was invited. She unfortunately wasn't able to make it, so Dr. Tabak represented the NIH. So it was great. So Larry had a chance to really talk about the fabulous things that we're doing in the whole area of climate change and health. So it was great that we're getting that type of publicity. That I just want to put in a plug here. So thank you to Gwen and to Aubrey, and I know Claudia Thompson and many of David's colleagues in DERT. It's just been a pleasure working with them. It's been a lot of work, but we've made a lot of progress, and it's really good to know that we're using some of the stimulus money that Congress provided us to really make research in the area of climate change and health happen. Next slide. So just a few updates, NIEHS updates. So the next slide. So David alluded to this, that we have awarded a grant. It's a grant that's $1.55 million per year for 5 years. And this grant was to support the Center for Exposome Research Coordination. So it's really about getting the community across the United States working collaboratively together with the communities across the European Union and across the globe of developing strategies on how we can be working collaboratively together. We don't want to be competing with each other. Let's develop collaborative strategies where we can all work together. So it's about building a global community of practice for cooperation and collaboration in coordination with the European Human Exposome Network, or it's the IHEN. So we also want to develop a framework to address how do we do studies using an exposomics framework. So promote, there may be new technologies that need to be developed and new methods and strategies for data sharing. And we also want to capitalize on the existing exposome research initiatives. David talked about our very successful HERE program. So can we use those infrastructures currently to actually do exposome related research and then be thinking about innovative new strategies, the way we can be doing things in the future. So I'm very pleased to announce that Dr. Gary Miller and his colleagues at Columbia, at Harvard, and the University of Southern California were awarded this grant. The money is coming not just from NIEHS, but in the spirit of collaboration. We're getting support from NAEHS, we're getting support from NCI, from NINDS, National Institute on Aging, and the Office of Research on Women's Health. So again, it's been a great collaborative effort, and I really applaud Dr. Belshaw and his colleagues in DERT for reaching out and passing, as we say in government or at the NIH, we passed the tin cup, and fortunately there were a number of institutes and centers and offices that actually dropped a few coins, more than a few coins, into the cup. Next slide. So congratulations, Gary. And so this is just a very, very quick look at the Nexus network for exposomics in the United States. So you've got Gary Miller here working together with Rima and working together with, I can't even read my slides here. So it's just too small. So Patel at Harvard Medical School. I mean, a number of other people here. Gary, maybe during the Q&A, you can just expand on this. But you can see here that he's already developed collaborative working relationships with multiple sites, not only across the United States, but across the global community. So that's exactly what we're going to be asking Gary to do. So next slide. And, I mentioned in the context of mechanistic biology and toxicology. So I'm very pleased to announce that NAEHS is co-sponsoring with MCATS a new common fund project that's called Complementary. So it's about complementing it's about developing NAMs, these new approach methodologies. So this would be in vitro systems where you take iPS cells, differentiate it into, say, microphysiological systems. It's about doing innovative things with data management, as well as in silico approaches to study potential toxicity. So it's the complementary NAMS technology. There will be developmental centers. The estimated release date of the NOFO is October 18th in 2024. I know that many of you are very interested in potentially tapping into this. So my understanding is that we'll be going forward with about $30 million per year, and hopefully, like other common fund projects, this will continue on for 10 years. Let's go on to the next slide. And, I talked about the Climate Change and Health Initiative. So we've had a website over the last couple of years, but now with much help from Christine Flowers and her colleagues in OCPL, working together with Gwen Coleman, many members of our steering committee, we put together a very robust website. So it's not an NIEHS website, it's an NIH website. So it's climateandhealth.nih.gov. So if you're interested in learning about funding opportunities, you want to join the community of practice, you want to attend one of the seminars, the regular seminars that are part of the Climate Change and Health Initiative, you want to learn more about the Visiting Scholars Program for Climate Change and Health, lots of different things. It's a great website, so I just encourage all of you to take a peek at it. Next slide. And actually, we also have a program that's part of it's a program that's part of the Climate Change and Health, but it's called CORDS. It's abbreviated CORDS. So for the Climate and Health Outcomes Research Data Systems, it's a PCORDIF funded project. We got several $1 million from HHS. It goes from March 2023 to March 2026. We're hoping that it would actually be renewed. So it's really about developing the data management infrastructures. You get data from wildfires, and you connect that with human health records. So lots of great work here. I know that Aubrey Miller in particular has been a very active leader in this program. And so if there are specific questions, I'm sure Aubrey would be willing to address them for you. Next slide. And they've developed a fabulous new website for the CORDS Climate and Health Data website for providing data. So this may be the model that we're going to be using for managing data and sharing data seamlessly across the global community for the whole Climate Change and Health Initiative. Next slide. And the last thing I want to talk about is we have a new acting clinical director. So Jan Hall has actually stepped down from that role after many successful years. And so she is very interested in kind of polishing up a number of research publications that she's been involved in. So Dr. Fessler has stepped into this role. We're very appreciative of this. He stepped in on January 1st, and he will be in this role until we hire a permanent clinical director. So if there are others that are interested in this position, the job description is out there, and feel free to toss your hat into the ring. Next slide. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about here is, so let's go on to the next slide. So bold predictions. Dr. Green talked about this. And so when Eric was giving a presentation to all of us at NIEHS last June, when he was physically visiting us, he talked about the strategy they used for their strategic plan and publishing this and developing bold predictions. And I think the senior leadership committee really embraced this notion. I certainly did. So what we want to do is we want to encourage all of you, read the strategic plan, okay? And once you've read the strategic plan, then I'd like you to submit to NIEHS director at nih.gov a very succinct, this is more of like a tweet than it is a full document, but just a statement that will succinctly describe how you think the world is going to be different. What are your predictions about how this new strategic plan is going to be influencing public health, influencing environmental health sciences, influencing the way that other ICs and other organizations within the global biomedical enterprise are studying environmental exposures as they study the etiology of human disease. So I want to encourage you to send in some bold predictions. And so I think, as Ashley is indicating, so we've sent the strategic plan ahead. So hopefully you've had a chance to read this. And next slide. So I think that's it for me. So what I want to do is, I think I still have some time, David. Is that right?
Yes, we do.
So we can take on.
We have until 12:15 for council
Right.
discussion.
So I want to make sure we have plenty of time to, well, first of all, address any questions you may have about the past performance on the strategic plan or the new elements of the strategic plan. But don't be bashful if anyone wants to offer up a very succinct, I think it's 200 characters or less, a succinct, bold prediction. How is this strategic plan with the three different major areas of focus? How is this likely to impact the future of public health, environmental health sciences, and biomedical research? Okay, so great. Okay, questions, comments, or bold predictions? Daryl, you gonna give us a bold prediction around health disparities and environmental justice?
I will save that to next meeting in person.
Okay, sounds good. And by the
Okay.
way, you don't have to give it now. You can just send
Okay,
this
great.
to director at NIH. Daryl, go ahead. You have a question or a comment?
Thank you very much. Yes, a question to you, Mr. Director. I appreciate that comprehensive report. But I noted that in your recitation, I went and looked up the proposed institutes, out of the report. And yes, you did talk to the Fogarty IC director, but what about the others, the ones that are proposed to put together and form this new institute? Do you plan on talking with them?
Well, I talk to them all the time, Daryl. In fact, I sat next to Eliseo Perez-Staffley at the IC directors meeting this morning. It just, I can't, if I went in and described everything I've done over the past several months, it would actually be pretty boring. But I have very active engagements, very active discussions. It's, all four of the other institute and ICs. Shannon Zank is very actively involved with her, especially on the climate change and health. There's a lot of interest in the social determinants of health. Trevor is working together with all of them, and not just Elaine Langevin, Shannon Zhang, Eliseo Perez-Staffley, and let's see, who am I missing? But across the board, talking with other ICs. There's lots of interest in, the environmental justice. Lots of interest in exposomics, precision environmental health, lots of things that we can be doing together. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Now, with regard to, I was wondering if you could provide a little bit more information, not necessarily guidance, but relative to the plans for the expansion of the P50 Centers program in environmental justice centers. So there are 3 now, and we are waiting on an RFA, something to come out, an announcement, probably an RFA, for out of NIMHD, right? And so is this just going to be the 3 renewals, and then how many more grants are planned in that regard?
In fact, it's interesting you brought that up. Eliseo just commented to me, he got approval from this council meeting, which I think was last week. But Trevor, Trevor, Dr. Archer has been very actively involved, actually passing the tin cup, developing plans to build on the existing P50 centers for health disparities, but most importantly, integrating the environmental justice element. Trevor, do you want to unmute? And I'm not sure what we can discuss publicly yet, but so rest assured we're doing a lot of work on this. But Trevor, could you summarize what we can actually discuss publicly?
Sure, I can. Happy to do so, Rick. And I'm really pleased to say that through the work with our colleagues across NIH, we are essentially going to be able to double the number of centers. We've gotten commitments for approximately a bit more than $6 million, which will allow us to put forward an RFA, which is being developed by NIMHD. And when that comes forward, we really hope to, we've secured commitments from other ICs to expand the funds that will be available for that. And I think that's about all I should be able to say. And David can certainly mute me if I'm going off script.
Thanks, Trevor.
I think you're okay, Trevor. Keep your eyes open. It's coming.
Yep. Daryl, thanks for that question. Okay, let's see. Who do we have here? David, can you help me out?
Patricia.
Here? It's my.
Yep.
Oh yeah, there we are. Patricia, yes. You got a question or a comment?
I have two questions, actually. Good morning, everyone. The first question is, first of all, I appreciate the formation of the new tribal advisory board, and the fact that you had a meeting is wonderful. I was just wondering what their priorities are when it comes to the institute. And then secondly, the second question I have is, while the data says, the national data shows that vaping and e-cig use among youth are going down, the rates actually are going up among American Indian and Alaska Natives. So I'm just wondering what the Institute is doing, I guess, internally to look more at just the detrimental effects of these products, and just to see if the tribes are even thinking about, I guess, this issue as well.
Actually, that's a great question. David, is Liam? Is he available?
Yeah, Liam is on, and I think we can bring him in to provide a little bit more context, and maybe Fred as well on the vaping
and
question.
on the vaping issue.
Yeah. So I think.
So Patricia, can we hold that question for just a couple of minutes?
Yeah.
Sure, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that TAC, was really kind of blown away with the activities that we've already led at NIEHS on looking at the engagement with tribal communities and the responsiveness to the needs of those communities around environmental exposure. So I think that there's going to be lots of opportunity for potential partnership between the NIH's Tribal Health Research Office, THRO, with NIEHS, and it was really a great conversation. I know that we've had a number of programs around EVALI, so the vape-induced lung injury, and it is part of our program with the FDA on the tribal or the tobacco regulatory program. So I'll turn it over first to Liam to comment a little bit more about our relationship with TAC and their interests, and then Fred to talk about the vaping.
Dr. Henderson, thank you very much for that question. During the TAC meeting, vaping was not brought up. There is an extensive interest in climate change and human health, and an expressed interest, surely, in, as David and Rick have both said, in having further discussions with the Tribal Health Research Office, as well as in partnership with the TAC, to discuss what priorities and what ways in which NIEHS and what we're doing with tribal communities to address climate change and human health health effects. There have been some work with vaping. I know through our community engagement cores, through the environmental health sciences core centers, to look at some of those conversations around vaping on tribal lands. I don't have that information at my fingertips right now, but I'd be certainly happy to find that and share that with you.
Thanks.
I mean, there are so
Fred,
many
and-
issues around environmental justice and tribal communities. I think that, and unfortunately, I don't have my notes from the meeting in front of me, but I think that they were just really impressed at the types of things that we're doing, really getting out in front of tribal communities, listening to what the tribal communities have to say, and then developing strategies to actually resolve some of these issues. Fred, is there anything you want to add about the work that we're doing on vaping?
Sure. I'd like to, there's some information I'd like to share. I can't tell you anything specific that we're doing with tribal communities, but in terms of what we're doing with vaping, we are more interested. We invest more in what the exposures to vaping aerosols or secondary types of exposures is the same thing that we do with combustible tobacco. We look more at the impacts that can be associated with the flavorings that are used, as well as the vehicles that come in alone, because they also cause problems. We're looking at issues that are associated with metal deposition in various different parts of the body that may come associated with, again, vaping, because you can change. What people do with these devices is they can change settings on them. And when you change the settings, you can influence you'd influence basically the set of metabolites or things that come that are produced by changing heating and wattage, that type of thing. And I think I said something about flavorings that we're looking at. And one of the bigger components of this is we're very concerned with what's happening with children that are exposed as they're developing in the womb. You have pregnant mothers who are convinced that vaping may be safer than using traditional cigarettes, so they use these electronic nicotine delivery systems, and there's a lot that's really unknown. So we're looking at impacts on using models as well as in populations on cognitive, behavioral types of aspects, as well as lung injury, or folks that may, or certainly with animal models, offspring that grow to adulthood and may be more prone to cardiovascular risk or lung injury as a result of having been exposed in utero. So these are the types of things that we've been investing in.
Yeah, so it's just that educational program, helping people understand they're not just breathing in water vapor. So as Fred indicated, the combustion of these flavoring components, the FDA approved the flavoring components to be eaten, not to be combusted and vaporized, and it's and then causing potential lung injury. So it's just complicated. And some of this, what is it, polyethylene glycol, Fred? If I remember correctly, you combust that. That's the net.
Yes, and vegetable glycerol as well. These are just the vehicles that they alone, without putting any nicotine or flavoring in, can cause dysfunction with lipid metabolism in macrophages, and that also contributes to lung injury.
Patricia, does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much. We're working very closely with Navajo Nation on just the vaping epidemic that is happening there. So this is the type of information that I'll go back and share with them. Thank you so much.
Well, there are so many things happening in tribal communities, and it's astonishing that we as a country allow some of these things to happen on tribal communities. It's amazing. Okay, other questions, comments? You want to offer up see Gary Geller? Good, Gary, your hand is up. You going to offer up a bold prediction?
I was actually going to ask more about, I wanted you to look into your crystal ball about this reorganization, about the likelihood of it happening, and is it an all or none thing? I mean, because some of the suggestions I've heard for more than a decade, others are kind of quite disruptive. And I just didn't know, like, what has to happen. Is it who's really pushing it on the congressional side, and what you've heard.
Right. So Gary, so it's coming from the House, and it's the whole budget allocation is coupled with this reorganization. Now, there's never been, in fact, Monica, Dr. Bertinelli was talking about this at the ICU directors meeting earlier this morning. I mean, there's never been a case where the budgetary allegation is coupled with a NIH reorganization. And so it's unclear at this point what role the NIH is going to be playing in this. This would be a little unprecedented. Usually you ask the CEO of an organization to take on the responsibility to figure out if there's a reorganization that's happening. You leave it up to them, not up to, say, an advisory committee or people from Congress. So this is, I think, best I can tell, this is new territory. And there's a lot that would have to happen between now and over the course of the next several months. So I guess the only thing we can do is kind of keep an eye on it. And I don't know how this would effectively change the research strategy. So we'll be if it actually goes forward, we would be integrating with Fogarty. I mean, we have lots of collaborative work with Fogarty, with NCCIH already, and we do a lot of work with NIMHD and nursing. So in nursing is Shannon Zank is leading the charge on a social determinants of health panel, and really taking on the whole issue of social determinants of health. In fact, Dr. Archer has recently joined the executive committee for that. So there's a lot of collaborative work that we're doing already. And I think when we first heard about this, Dr. Bertinelli was commenting that, in fact, I think part of the reasons why she wasn't able to be at our council yesterday is that she's actually on the Hill kind of explaining to members of Congress that they don't have to reorganize the NIH to get us working together. We have a lot of collaborative work that's happening, and we're actually working together quite well. So, and I don't think that they're aware of that, but she is very effective. So I think she's been spending a lot of time on the Hill and hoping to reinforce that message. So Gary, the answer is I don't know. And there's not a lot of certainty that I'm hearing about what's going to be happening, other than that there have been attempts to reorganize the NIH multiple times. I think Harold Varmus had an attempt to, I think, bring it down to like 6 ICs or something when he was the IC director or the NIH director. I mean, that didn't happen. And there was also a recent attempt to aggregate NIAAA and NIDA, and that didn't happen. So I suspect that our friends of NIEHS will probably have something to say about this. They have the ability to actually get on the Hill and express their point of views. I mean, we can't do that as federal employees. But Dr. Bertinelli is there, and I think just reinforcing the message, we do a lot of collaborative work already. And if there are certain ICs that would make scientific sense to aggregate, then I think Dr. Bertinelli would like to be in a position to help make that happen. So I guess the main thing is, Gary, stay tuned. You don't want to venture a bold prediction, huh? Okay, we'll come back to you. Maria, your hand is up.
Yeah, just following up on Gary's question. I'm sure you have legal counsel looking at this, but I don't understand why that's not a separation of powers problem. Why the Congress, the legislative branch, is directing the NIH to reorganize. So just a note there, that doesn't seem like their role, and that it would be legally acceptable for them to require that through the budget. But I'm sure you guys have counsel looking at that.
Rest assured, we have counsel looking at that, and there are just a number of unusual things happening in Congress these days. You're probably aware of that. And yes. So I think that there are members of Congress that want to see change happen. And I think one of the things that I'm hearing from, well, Republicans and Democrats is that they really want to see the NIH be in a better position to be taking on new and bold initiatives. So, are there things that we can be doing to really advance science? So more high risk, high reward. So that's been a feature of our intramural research program. Are there ways that we can be expanding some of the things we've already done? The River Awards and other sorts of things. Are there creative ways that we can be advancing, the high risk, high reward to make big things happen that are funded by the NIH? So it's a lot of discussion about this. So this was a whole topic of discussion that I'm not at liberty to discuss with all of you, but it was a topic of the discussion at the IC directors meeting this morning. But Maria, rest assured that yes, Dr. Bertinelli has all of her legal team and others in the office of the director looking carefully at this guidance. Okay, Andre.
Thank you. And thank you for the extensive presentations. My point here is kind of essentially a follow-up of what you were just mentioning in part of your presentation, that you pointed out a number of times there's still a lot to do, and a lot of people want a lot more to do to get accomplished. However, with the flat budget, those seem to be contradictory positions on accomplishing all the things that we need to do. Your thoughts on how we're going to move past that point with reduced potentially pay lines and obviously more challenges to investigators wanting to get engaged.
Well, you've raised a very important point. So what do we do in the context of a flat budget? So there are a couple of things that we're talking about here is that you have to reprioritize. So if you want to, all organizations should always be doing new things. If you're stopping doing new things, then you stagnate, and that's not a good position to be in. So that's part of the challenge that I have is that how do we continue to incentivize all of you and people throughout the environmental health sciences community, the biomedical community? How do we continue to incentivize them to be doing bold new things? But if that's the case, then we have to look carefully at, what are all the things we're doing? So are there things that we're currently doing that we essentially feel we're not getting the bang for the buck? So it's I guess the answer, the first part of it, Andre, is prioritizing. So we have to look carefully at that. We're looking at this. You have to look at this as well. The second part of this is, I just want to emphasize a point of that, NIEHS has traditionally been the institute that funds environmental health research. So part of my motivation is getting environmental health out more broadly across the NIH is that we need to be able to, perhaps some of you are going to be getting your grants funded from NIA or the NCI. So if we start developing the strategy to integrate environmental health into the fabric of the way that the NCI studies cancer research, and they should. I mean, there are a lot of environmental perturbations that influence a cancer outcome, neurological disorders, aging. There are environmental exposures that influence aging. So when I look across the entire NIH, there are things that we can be doing, and my colleagues in the other ICs can be doing that really have an environmental health element to them. And so hopefully we can kind of expand the funding portfolio to all of you who are traditionally funded by NIEHS to include potentially being funded by the 46 billion across the 26 other institutes and centers. So part of just also maybe if it's not apparent that I'll just point it out, part of the reason why we're really reaching out in the whole climate change and health and getting a very enthusiastic response from other ICs and IC directors, I'm very pleased by that. But if when it comes down to it, when you look at the impact of climate change on health, it's about the environment. So so hopefully this is a way of kind of whetting the appetite of other institutes and centers to be able to take on some of the work relating to environmental exposures in the context of climate change, but hopefully just whetting their appetite that there are very important things that can contribute to helping them understand the etiology of disease, say cancer or neurological diseases, in their own portfolio. Does that answer your question? I wish I had an easier answer, which is that that we'll continue to have budgetary increases and that we can use, as we have over the last several years, use the budgetary increases to help foster new programs that bring innovative ideas forward. And that's part of the challenge that we have. I'm sorry, go ahead.
200 character bold response.
What's that?
Your 200 character bold response, bold prediction on this
Well,
topic.
we have to look at the strategic plan. So we're going to be looking very carefully at reprioritizing. We have to. We all have to. If you want to do new things, and you don't have new money to do it, then you have to reprioritize what you're doing to find the money to do new things. Now, I've been in your positions in academics for most of my career, and especially in say 2008 and 2009, there wasn't a lot of new money coming in when I was the director of the Jackson Laboratory. We had to very carefully prioritize, and that was again, I maintain that if any organization, any science organization, has to continue to grow, even under tough budgetary circumstances. So that's tough. But we're hoping that the framework of the strategic plan will give all of us and give all of you a sense of what are the types of things that we can be doing to really advance environmental health sciences. So let's see. David, help me out here again. My screen is, I'm not seeing.
Steph.
Anyone else have their hand up?
Yep, Steph has her hand up.
So I think
Okay,
that these
Steph?
are critical points. I think one of the problems we have is we're encouraging these collaborative sciences, and like the programs that actually run these huge collaborative efforts, like the Superfund research program, continually get cut. And so those cuts keep us from actually doing those larger projects and bringing in more and more research and data that is not incremental, but leaps and bounds into the community and for public health. I don't know how to get around that, but unless we can figure out how to get Congress and the people who give us funding to understand that when you're working in a collaborative team, it takes a lot more money and effort, and that by cutting those budgets, all we're doing is watering them down to less than RO1s for the research. And so less and less is getting done, even though we're saying we want to do more and more on a collaborative level.
Well, Steph, rest assured that when I meet with, say, the Four Corners, when I meet with other members of Congress, that's part of my message. And it's their response back to me is that, Dr. Wycheck, you've got to understand we're working in a very complicated working environment on Capitol Hill right now. And so if you're not aware of that, then I encourage you, turn on the television every morning and watch the news. It's very complicated. There are some members of Congress that want to do some pretty drastic reductions in specific areas of the budget. So
are there things we can do?
Well, let's see here. Yes, there are things you can do. So let me see, David, or is Christine Flowers on? What specifically can we encourage members of our council and non-federal employees? What can we be encouraging them to do? We have our friends group who are not members of the federal staff who are pretty vocal. David, do you want to comment on this? I just want to make sure I don't say something out.
So we have to be very careful in what we say. But I think you are all private citizens, and you have your ability to take advantage of your citizenship. and you have each other. So you can work together to advocate for the quality of the work that you're doing, and make sure that your representatives are aware of the impact of the work that we're doing here. And yeah, I see Jan has her hand up.
Jan, go ahead.
Yeah, I know I'm not like a member of council or leadership anymore, but I did want to make the point that I think that, you know, all of us are members of professional societies, and professional societies can do a lot. They can do the kind of thing that we in the government cannot do. And so I really would personally encourage you to work with your, you know, the groups in your professional societies who potentially can have an influence on this, because I think it's really important. I know that, you know, they can do sort of staff briefings and all sorts of things that we in the government are not able to do.
Yeah, Jan, that's a great point. So professional societies, I know, are, you know, pounding the pavement in Congress right now. And so the only thing I would suggest, I mean, you are all private citizens, you can contact your congressional representatives and chime in. I would just suggest that we try to get our messaging coordinated, so that if you're taking a message to, you know, Congress, you know, we have a new strategic plan, and Congress, by the way, is very interested in strategic planning. So that's been something that they've really been pushing us on. So if there's a new strategic plan and you think this is pretty exciting stuff and that this would provide opportunities to advance the environmental health sciences, then, you know, use the strategic plan. It's a public document. And, you know, just the other comment that I'll make is that it's when you're trying to get people engaged in, you know, helping you out, trying to let them know that, you know, the work that we're doing has been very impactful, and that additional funding will allow us to do additional work. So, and I see that Maria actually put in the chat, well, one of the important things we can all do is vote. Bevan, good to see you. I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, what would be great would be stories, right? So it's great to show the plan, but having facts and figures about the benefits of the work that comes from NIEHS will really help in terms of fundraising and convincing politicians to support our work. And so I actually suggest that, you know, that there be a web page on the NIEHS website that anyone can pull if they want to advocate for the programs that we do.
So that's a really great point. And I've always found that if you're going to go, if individuals are going to Congress, it would be nice to everyone to be reinforcing a common set of themes. So I don't know if Christine Flowers is listening in or if we can actually get her on the panel here.
We do not have either Christine nor April on.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I do think we need to be very cautious with this.
I'm here.
Oh, are you here?
No, Gwen.
Yeah.
Gwen, you're here. Okay.
Hey, yeah.
Do you want to comment on this?
I just want to frame it in a way that is, I think, more appropriate. We are always able to educate different stakeholders, and those stakeholders are anxious to learn. And we, as federal employees, as an institute, cannot ask you nor encourage you to advocate. So I would like us to use the terminology that resonates with sort of what is appropriate. I think we can take some of the information that David put together in his presentation today, either share those slides intact. I think they're in your ECB anyway. You can look at those. And then I'd be happy to talk to Christine about perhaps a fact sheet that would be useful for anybody who would like to do some more education.
Gwen, that's a really, really good point. So it's about educating, and we're happy to educate people.
Absolutely.
Okay, other comments and questions? Liam, it looks like you're putting something in the chat. Do you want to just unmute and just share that with the rest of the group?
Yeah, I just wanted to loop back to the conversation about the Tribal Advisory Committee meeting. And that again, about their enthusiasm. And one of the things that they really pointed out as part of that too is they appreciated learning about what we had done or what we were currently doing. And while that was good, they would like to have that opportunity to sort of be a part of the conversation and help to maybe provide some guidance and inform things as they take place too, or as we're talking about the early planning stages. So it's not just the past, but talking with them about the future too.
And I think based on that comment of the TAC, hopefully our colleagues on the TAC will be more interested in hearing about the stuff we do at NAEHS, which I think is pretty remarkable. Okay, other comments, questions? Does anyone want to venture a bold prediction?
We had one from Gary a little bit ago in the chat.
Oh, we did. Okay, I didn't. Gary, do you want to unmute and just share that with the group?
I gotta go back and read it here. Let's see what I said.
Okay.
Exposome medicine will become actionable. We'll go way past measuring lead levels and start incorporating exposure profiles into clinical care.
Sounds good. I think that's great. Cheryl, I see that your hand is up. You going to venture a bold prediction?
No.
Or do you have a question or comment?
But I do have a question for you. I think
Sure.
that the aftermath of the debates and listening to how that was filtered really brings the economy to the fore. And I'm just wondering how you've been able, or have you been able to come up with estimates of savings, for example, in the healthcare by, down ramping the effect of the environment, or some of these that could actually get leveraged as an ROI, that investing in this initiative is expected to return this. Could you give us your thoughts on that?
No, Cheryl, that's a really great point. And what I've found in the past and continue to find is that politicians, when you talk about money and jobs, those are the things that it resonates with them. So and David, you can help me out here. So we've had some efforts to actually go in, and this past round of our strategic plan, to go in and try to estimate the financial savings attributable to prevention of exposure to heavy metals, exposure to the air pollution and things like that. But I haven't seen them recently. Do we have that data that we can actually polish up and then use that as talking points if members are interested in educating our appropriators?
Yeah, we do have some of that information, which we can dig up. And I think Eric Prasad is on, and he really spearheaded the effort within the worker training program, which I think is really a model for how this worked. I don't know, Eric, if you're comfortable coming on camera and off mute and sharing a little bit about the work that you did.
Yeah, sure, of course. Good afternoon, everybody. We recognized how important it was to better understand the impacts of our program and the program overall, to make sure that we're actually doing the things that we aim to achieve. And over the last year, we worked with an economist and myself to look at the environmental career worker training program that David alluded to earlier. And we looked at it both qualitatively and quantitatively. We got input from our grant recipients. So this was not just spearheaded by NAEHS. We worked collaboratively with our groups to better understand the impacts they were having, looking at their data for job reports, the hiring of those workers, as well as looking at how the impact traded them in their lives. So money is important. Getting better wages are important. Getting more working opportunities are important, but also how does that lead to sustainability in one's life? How does that actually impact the careers and the well-being of the person overall? And we were able to look at the program find that once again, it had that 28 return on investment annually for the program, but also had significant impacts in helping turn around the lives of many of these people who are in the program. So just remembering who goes into it. They are coming from underserved or underrepresented communities. They are on and underemployed people, people who may be homeless, people who are formerly incarcerated, generally just down on their luck and needing that help to turn around. And what that also does is help to improve the trust of these people that we work with, our grant recipients in the community, to be trusted leaders in the community, to getting workforce development improved, and ultimately cleaning up and better serving those communities at large.
You know, Eric, I think that's really inspiring, and I'd love to see some of that. You know, I just wanted to also reflect, you know, we have in Texas, one of the few good things we have in Texas is the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute, which has different R01 type fundings. It has prevention research, but it also has product development where they like to grow companies. And the legislatures tend to love the product development company grants because they see it as bringing jobs to Texas. But when you actually look at the amount of people employed by the research grants, the laboratory technicians, and so the staffers and so forth, the number is much larger than those few companies that might put a few folks here and then contract out, you know, for some of the work that they do. And so I think there's some really compelling economic arguments, and I'm glad to hear that y'all are looking at those.
Yeah, so Eric, I think the comments you were making were primarily for the worker training program. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was talking about our environmental curriculum and the work.
Yeah, and the numbers there are just remarkable. That unfortunately that's a very small part of our overall budget, our $1 billion budget. But nevertheless, it's when I talk about the Superfund program, worker training program, when I highlight those numbers, it's people really pay attention. And Cheryl, you're absolutely right. It's, you know, I found this out when I was in the Jackson Laboratory. When I would, you know, go to the governor's office and talk about the great basic research we're doing, he would listen very respectfully, and then it would end. But when I went in and talked about I think we had a 17-fold return on investments. So every dollar that the state invested in the Jackson Laboratory, we also had just the numbers. Most of the dollars from the NIH come in from out of state, and these are, and the salaries are for, you know, the average salary for a Jackson Laboratory employee was much higher than the average salary for most people across the state of Maine. So, and then talking about spin-off companies, I tell you, that's when action started happening. And so then I actually put up several buildings using the support from the state of Maine. But you're absolutely right. So we have to pay more attention on not just the fabulous science returns that we have, but then monetizing that to the impact. You know, the prevention strategy is if we prevent cancer, that's a whole bunch of cost saving. So we'll have to work on that. So let's see what we can put together for you. But thanks for bringing that up. Gwen, I see that your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. I put a few things in the chat, and then some of my colleagues also added. So we have on various websites around the NIH and NIEHS, there are these stories that you have been asking for. NIEHS actually has a history of writing stories of discovery, and we have those here. Liam has a link now to what we're calling translational research stories, which started there. I gave you a link from the NIH where they show stories of impact from all across all the institutes, but the first 4 are from NIEHS, and they're on things like PFAS and pesticides and other important environmental health topics. And then Michelle Heacock put one in the chat related to the Superfund program. So I think maybe what would make it easy for all of you is if we pack those links up and we put them in one email and we sent them to you, and that after this meeting you would have them readily available so that you could use them however you would like, rather than relying on you getting them actively through the chat.
Yeah, Gwen, if we could do that, that would be great. But let's also think about, you know, putting together the other, you know, promotional material that we have for NIEHS and the Superfund program, the worker training program, you know, packaging this together as a kind of a comprehensive message. So if members of council or members of our advisory groups, non-government advisory groups, if they're interested in taking this to their appropriators, they have the materials to do that. Thank you, Gwen.
Sure.
Great. Bevan, another comment or question?
Yeah, thank you. So, people often think, oh, this many lives saved or this amount of money saved, and those are obviously great statistics. But I also think, and I'm sure you already have this in mind, but health span, right? And the avoidance of morbidity, not just mortality. If we can emphasize that as well, I think that would really be a big plus.
Oh, I agree with you totally. Yeah, we're on health span, not just lifespan. Keep people healthy. Okay, David, do we have other comments or questions?
We have
Gokhan.
a comment from Gokhan, and then I think
Gokhan,
it is time for us to move to our lunch break. So Gokhan, you have the last word.
Sure. I think during several council meetings, we talked about why the physicians not spending the time or documenting a workspace or environmental exposures, which will probably give us a better idea about whether the environmental exposure might have led to the disease process. I think with the advancement in the wearables and they become more sophisticated, we'll probably have a better idea about environmental exposures at the personal level. That will also probably give us, in the future, a better idea about linking, at least have a causal link between exposure and the disease process. And
Well,
this is not only
you're
metal exposure, but like noise is a big issue. As we talked about social determinants, maybe there will be a way to measure stress levels, and we will have an idea because you can actually look at, in sleep medicine, for instance, we use stress levels to determine if someone has sleep apnea, for instance, catecholamine surge, parasympathetic nervous system activation, exposure to noise or chemicals or particulate matter. All these things we'll be able to determine by wearing a wearable device.
Yeah, you bring up noise, and actually another thing that I can actually point out is that I have very active discussions with Deb Tucci, who's the director of deafness and communication disorders. So I think she is totally convinced that noise is a very important environmental variable. And so you have personal devices now. In fact, when I'm at certain concerts, I've got my Apple Watch on, and I know when to put my earplugs in because the noise is really over 90 decibels. So no, it's absolutely, noise is a very important variable here. And then you have the direct effects on hearing loss, and then the cognitive effects that may follow from hearing loss. So it's a very complicated issue, but a very important one. And it's clearly it's something that falls within the scope of the exposome. Okay, David, back to you. So do we want to?
Yeah, I think it's time for us to take
our
lunch break. So we'll do a temporary adjournment until 1 o'clock, when we will get started with a series of presentations from DERT on so the complementary program that Rick has discussed a few times. We'll do a deeper dive on that, and then 2 concept clearances that we need council's consideration of. So with that, I wish everybody a happy lunch, and we'll see you in about 40 minutes. We'll start promptly at 1.
We'll be back, David, right at 1 o'clock.
Right at 1 o'clock.
Great. Thanks everyone.